In the United States, on average, 1,000 children a day will be sexually abused. 360,000 children a year. That's about 5 football stadiums full of sexually abused children every single year. We're looking at 46 million survivors of child sexual abuse living in the United States.
I'd like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. And on today's episode, we have got on Nate Lewis from The Innocent. Welcome to the show, Nate. How you doing?
I'm doing just right, man. So good to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you. Nate, introduce my audience to who you are and your work.
Oh, yeah. So I am the founder and CEO of an organization called The Innocent, and we go around the United States and train law enforcement how to be proactive in investigations to protect and preserve the innocence of children, really from online predators, but sex trafficking, exploitation, and just sexual assault. So that's a brief little introduction of what it is, but essentially we're in this fight to protect children.
That is a very heavy line of work. How did you get into it?
Oh, yeah. It is heavy. It's an interesting story. I worked in Hollywood for a couple of decades and worked for Jim Caviezel, who played a gentleman in the Sound of Freedom movie that really fights this type of work internationally. And it was through that and an introduction to the guy that he played that I actually went and started working internationally and working in all types of human trafficking and sex trafficking, child trafficking, but all kinds of different forms of trafficking, whether it's witch doctors sacrificing children, forced begging.
You mean working, fighting against it?
I'm in working, fighting against it. Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh man.
Just to be
What's
clear for
great
the
is
audience.
with this darkness, you have to laugh. So I'm glad that we can at least kind of laugh because it's kind of healthy for us to laugh. So I may slip up a word here and there, but thank you for correcting that. Yes, we're anti-trafficking, so we're fighting against it. We're hunting down the predators and going after the evil that's out there in the world, potentially harming children. So worked internationally. I listened to the people. I live in the U.S., and a lot of them were like, "What are we doing here? What can I do here? How do I keep my money here and protect our children?" And it really was that simple. And I said, well, let me find out why we're not doing anything. And talking to a lot of law enforcement friends, the resources were a lot of it, resources for equipment, but also just training to understand how to do this. And with the technology and so much being online, how do you really get into these websites? How do you infiltrate this network? Which is fairly new. We've been fighting the war on drugs for decades, but now I call it the war for innocence. It's time to start fighting this war for innocence of children. And so that's how this kind of began, a year and a half ago. We just set forward of like, we're going to go across the U.S. and we're just going to train and equip law enforcement.
I hear that. Can you tell me about the scale of this issue, both in the USA and worldwide?
Yeah. So I guess it's really to be specific on what we're talking about. So child sex trafficking, exploitation, sexual assault, those are all the arenas that we work in. So I'll give you a couple of stats. I'll start with the kind of easy ones to grasp, or somewhat easy, I guess. In the United States, on average, 1,000 children a day will be sexually abused. That kind of turns into 360,000 children a year. And to put that into a little bit of perspective for those watching wherever you are, I'm going to use the term football, meaning American football, but real football. That's about 5 football stadiums full of sexually abused children every single year. It's a pretty large number. And then when you start getting into a larger scale, when you look back in history, we're looking at 46 million survivors of child sexual abuse living in the United States right now. So that's how many are alive living right now that have been abused as a child. So sexual abuse has been going on for generations, and with children, right? That's a large number too. You're looking at 32 football stadiums filled over 18 times. That's a lot of people in the United States living with some sort of sexual abuse as a child. So it's pretty prominent when you just talk about sexual abuse. And that's one of the things we're really focused on is it's not always trafficking. And trafficking happens in a lot of different ways. That's kind of the tip of the pyramid is human trafficking. And then underneath that are all different types of forms of exploitation, solicitation, voyeurism, all types of things that fall underneath that umbrella that we're kind of focusing on. But the reality is when a child's been sexually abused, a part of that innocence is gone. So we're trying to avoid that. and we're trying to prevent that from happening so we can preserve that innocence. And through the training, build strong cases so that potentially we can build thousands of years behind bars and create thousands of years of innocence. A little deeper right now, with the generation of technology, we're looking at about 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused before they turn 18. And 1 in 5 teens will be solicited for sex online. So that's a pretty big number, 1 in 5 being solicited for sex online. So that's a kind of a minor look. If you want, I can keep giving you statistics about sexual predators and registered sex offenders, ones hundreds of thousands that are missing, and potentially what that looks like. And we're being reactive versus proactive. There's a lot. There's a lot. There's some studies that have been done I can share too, but I don't want to just talk the whole time either. So, if there's specifics you want to know, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah, well, some of those numbers are, well, all of those numbers are deeply concerning. I mean, you said 36 million people living in the USA who experienced some form of SA when they were children. So, if my math is right, that's something like 1 in 8, 1 in 9 adults.
Yeah, and it's actually 40. It's over 40 million, 46 million. But yes, that's the crazy thing. You're looking at look at 10 people. Now that's adults. It's the numbers increased now. So for the younger generation, it's actually increased. That's just taking the total population of the United States. But now with what's going on, and I think this is important for people to understand, like, how? And just to give you a little idea how, is when I was a kid a long time ago, it was more of look out for the guy at the park with the van or whatever it was, like who's hanging around the playground. But right now, things are not that way. There's so many cameras on every street corner. These guys and women, mostly men, don't want to go out into public and expose their identity, right? So why wouldn't they just stay at home, hide their identity online, or try to hide their identity online? And with 37 million teens on social media alone, just social media, that's not including all the video games and being online in other places, but that's where a lot of children are at. 37 million children in the United States on social media. So they're going to hide or make a fake ID or profile. They're going to go into these social media accounts and really introduce themselves to these teenagers. Because according to the Department of Justice, 90% of sexual abuse happens to someone who, or by someone that they know or trust. But that sometimes can come through grooming. So they meet somebody, whether it's a real adult or somebody posing as a child, and they start to get to know them. They build this trust, and then eventually they meet in person, or we call it an innocence onion. These layers of innocence. They'll just start sending pretty foul messages to these young kids, and photos even to these kids, or videos of themselves. And so you're also looking at, that's illegal, falls underneath human trafficking, that exploitation, and those crimes are really punishing children. And we can talk a little bit about these platforms enabling it. When we go online undercover posing as children, we might get a friend request from an adult male and we're an 11-year-old child. If we accept that, it's within minutes they're going to send you 5 to 10 more. And when you start accepting that, it's only a matter of 24 hours where you have 100 profiles of the same that are being suggested to you as a child and a grown adult, which, that's another problem in itself. So, yeah, it's kind of overwhelming, to be honest with you. And I understand that it is a little overwhelming, but it doesn't mean that we should ignore it. And I think the more we talk about it and the more it becomes common conversation, the more will be done, because people will demand more and get involved and really know. And then we'll talk about this later, but having those conversations with children, because if you don't understand this and know this as a parent, and you don't understand the safety measures that you can take as a parent, you're kind of putting your child at risk. So there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done, just an awareness and education.
If you're a fan of dystopian fiction and sci-fi thrillers, then you should check out Lucid, a new novel by writer Michael S. Milano. Lucid is a 21st century blend of 1984 and Brave New World, set during a devastating pandemic. The year is 2084, and the Pansophical Corporation protects what's left of humanity from the deadly Timbaku virus and a terrorist organization known as Praxis. After losing his wife to the pandemic and being assaulted by public safety for violating curfew, citizen Anthony Sartori begins to have bizarre flashbacks. In a culture dominated by suspicion, asking the wrong questions could put him in the crosshairs, but Anthony is determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. Lucid is an exciting and timely read that cautions against collectivism, technological surveillance, and sacrificing freedom for the illusion of safety. If that's up your alley, go to lucidthebook.com and grab yourself a copy today. That's LUCID, thebook.com to get yourself a copy. Free to be safe, safe to be free. lucidthebook.com. Nate, tell me more about what is going on these social media platforms and what safeguards are in place and which ones are not but should be.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I always start with having a real relationship with your children, and that is going to be the most beneficial thing in everything that you do. Is have a real conversation, have a real relationship, create a safe place, even with these difficult conversations that have to take place. You got to create a safe place for them. But as a parent, you have to really get educated because the younger generation knows so much more about social media and technology, but we have to try to catch up to them to understand how it works. So some safeguards, I would say, after building that real relationship, make sure the children's, well, I would say the adults too, your accounts are locked down to private. I know that's a difficult conversation because teenagers this day and age, their sense of identity is connected to how many followers they have or how many friends they have. You know, it's a popularity thing. And that is a risk only because what we've seen is these girls who are just trying to get their numbers up are letting people in. And that's the scary thing is, you know, being inside your home in a locked house, inside a closed door in your bedroom. It's one thing to be exposed to the world that's out there that we live in now through the internet on your phone, but it's scarier to see that the world has access to your child through that same device inside of a room. So the social medias, close them down, parents too, because parents are posting pictures of their children, whether it's at a birthday party, by the pool, these young girls, and they're posting pictures of them in their bathing suits. It seems weird to us, normal people, but there are people who troll accounts trying to just take those photos and store them, trade them, whatever they may do, build profiles off of them. But the next thing I would say is there's apps like Bark's one of them, but you can find a lot of them that are out there to allow your children to just be normal-ish online. You're not going to restrict them completely, but it does give you red flags. It sets certain parameters. If they're visiting sites that could potentially have explicit images or whatever, it's going to notify you. It's also going to be able to access if there's language or conversations being taken place. It's going to let you know, and then you have to have that conversation. If as the adult paying for a cell phone, you actually have the right to that phone and any content that's on it as the owner of that phone and paying the bill. Another really interesting thing that's happening now is children in apps are really, it's a dangerous situation because there's the disappearing messages component to a lot of these platforms now. So when you send a message or somebody reads it, they set a timer, that message disappears. So parents can't see what kind of messages are happening. So they could be having some really nasty pictures, phone communications, and you may never know because it disappears after a certain amount of time. So make sure that that is not turned on. Don't enable that. Just set that rule that look, I'm okay with you having conversations. I want you to be a kid. I want you to do that, but let's be safe. Let's set safeguards, parameters, certain things like that. Another thing I always tell parents, look, if your child's going into their room alone at night, let just keep their phone outside of their room. There's no reason to let predators and people in their room with them behind closed doors. You wouldn't just allow some stranger to walk into your house that you didn't know and walk past you, go up the stairs and go into the room with your child. So I would say a very similar thing. It's a tricky time that we live in, the digital parenting, but there are some things that we have to do. You know, even your the kids' friends not having phones inside the room behind closed doors because you never know what they're doing, right, on those phones in a room behind closed doors. So those are a few. Those are a few.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what age do you think that In your personal opinion, at what age do you think it's a good idea to give children, if any age, some might say, no, wait until they're adults, they shouldn't be children, to give them smartphones and access to social media in particular? What are your personal thoughts, or maybe even if there's any findings that you have on that based on your work?
Yeah, well, man, this is my opinion. It's going to be nearly impossible to not allow your child to have a phone at some point for safety reasons. You can give it to them when the parents are home or whatever, and just for emergency situations. But here's how I feel. I don't think you can withhold it from them because that doesn't do them any favors. It's a matter of how do you teach them. I'm going to use the driving license analogy, and it makes sense to me. You would never just be like, "Oh, you're 18. Here's a car and some keys. Go drive." You really, they spend months, almost a half a year practicing to drive with a parent in the car with them. They also take tests online. They take a professional driving test with a certified person from the state that you live in, at least in the US, that says you passed the driving portion of your test, and you still have to take another digital version of that test. And then we put, airbags and seatbelts and all that stuff on there. But really, we're trying to train our children to drive safely on the roads. And that's the same thing that I would say on the phone with social media. We can't think that your child's never going to have a phone. They're going to get a phone. They're potentially going to be online on social media at some point. So we just need to teach them how to drive online. And so if you're going to say an age, man, it's so difficult for me. I don't believe a child needs a phone before they're 16, driving age. That would be in my home, probably what I would do. Again, it goes back to safety. There's a lot of features on a phone, that can call an emergency situation or whatever. But I would focus more on being honest with your children on the risks that are associated with just being online and being on social media, and letting them know that this could happen. And what do you do when somebody you don't know friend requests you or sends you a message? And how do you handle that? And I think that it's really more about teaching them how to operate and drive safely online, really, with a phone and through social media.
Yeah, for sure. Have you found that, I mean, I guess it might be impossible to get accurate statistics around this, but I would, I'm wondering if the proliferation and the rate of these various crimes and offenses has gone up as a result of smartphones and social media. Um, what are the, do you know what the data is like in that regard? Because my guess would be that sort of the low level stuff, let me say, has probably gone up, you know, by several orders of magnitude, but perhaps the physical contact stuff may have declined. That might be my guess. I don't know. I'm kind of just going off of intuition here. Do you know how much that has changed over the decades?
Yeah, I can only go off of kind of our experience with law enforcement's experience fighting all sorts of crimes, whether it's narcotics or sex crimes and that type of thing. I would say that it comes down to two things really, which has increased this. I would say that porn, honestly, the access to it and the dopamines and the addictions that are being occurred at such a young age, in the normalization of sexuality at an even younger age. So I would say that has a part to do with that. I won't go down that rabbit hole too far. Uh, I will say this: just in general, crimes across the board are much easier when these transactions can take place over the internet. And also, there are so many forums now. There are websites, .com websites actually. They're not even like restricted, like deep dark web stuff. They're just the clear web that are 100% pay for sex sites, right? And there's also forums. I'm not going to name some of these, but they're very well known. Most people have been on them potentially. And inside those sub forums, there are communities of really just sex, parties, sex interaction, pay for sex, uh, video uploading, changing, exchanging. This business that needed a brothel or a brick and mortar place to exist now doesn't so much have to, and the advertising doesn't have to be word of mouth. You can actually get into these areas. People are paying. Here's the thing: we used to think that you had to go into a brothel or a strip club or whatever it may be, which you still do, but there's also ways for people to make money. I mean, look at OnlyFans right now, right? That person, they just need a bedroom and you can make a lot of money doing this. And I think that that's the other thing with the internet is it's allowed opportunity to individuals for live feeds of camera feeds to make an income, because there are many examples of us busting, a man getting paid to molest his 2-year-old nephew at his sister's house. That's one true case that we were part of. And I'm going to try to keep this as G-rated as possible, but these are just the realities. These video forums or live abuse forums exist, and people are paying to not only just watch them, but to communicate their desires and wants and needs that they think they have inside of them to.
Nate, my brain is immediately just like, well, number one, disgusted, but number two, I'm like, how on earth is that allowed to continue? I mean, how can law enforcement not already be tackling all this and shutting it down? Like, it seems like a very obvious thing to do.
Very easy answer to that. I'll give you one specific example because we're working with this department. It's near Chicago, one of the largest departments, the second actually in the United States. And when you look at their budget in 2018 and you look at their budget in 2024, they lost $100 million in their budget. That's just fact. That's just pure fact. It's online. Go look at their website. It's Cook County. I'm not trying to expose too much, but the reality is the resources right now. Law enforcement has enough money to do their job, react to the 911 calls. Right? They have so much casework. They're overloading their detectives, investigators. A lot of officers are retiring earlier now because it's just not it's not what it used to be. Law enforcement. It's just not. There's also a lower number of recruits coming in, and so they are completely understaffed.
So the whole defund the police thing has had some negative consequences. Who would have guessed?
Yeah, well, look, how can you be proactive in a certain crime, doing investigations, if you don't have the resources to hire people to specifically work these crimes? Here's the thing: they have guys that are not. I call them like a sniper. They just focus on narcotics. There's drug task force. That's crazy, like how much money they have, and all they do is drugs. But there are some, but definitely minor individuals on a detective unit that only work child sex crimes or human trafficking. They exist, but it's very few. Where we started in my hometown at the time, there were 7 drug task force officers in that small little community in 0 child sex crimes. There were affiliates to like internet crimes against children, but no one that worked specific child sex crimes. The only way they were working those cases is a reaction, whether it's a tip, a cybercrime tip, or somebody called in, their daughter had said she'd been raped or whatever it may be. Those are reactive crimes. You have to have a budget to be able to allocate towards specific individuals that become an expert in this crime. Because if you don't live in this, you don't know you don't even know the places to go because they're always changing. They're getting shut down or reopened or moved over here, or a new thing pops up and the criminals are telling you where to go. But emojis, a certain lingo is changing. And if you don't live in this world all the time consuming it, you're way behind. You're way behind because it just changes so fast. No, we just need more funding, and not only the funding just for officers, but for the training. They can't pay 4 guys to fly to another state and put them up for a week for a 4-day training. That's where we come in to their town and we train their whole department. And actually, we don't train their department. We get all the surrounding departments too. So we're training 5 or 6 departments at one time, building a mini task force in these communities. And you're training them and they go home at night to see their families. And they're doing a live operation, real time conversations online, knowing where to go, all the laws. And then we run a full scale operation to where a few days ago, we arrested 2 people in a training. And that's the thing is they would have never had this training and some of this equipment that we're providing if it wasn't for the people backing us to support these law enforcement. So that was really the light bulb in my mind was like, they're missing out. Law enforcement's missing out because of the funding. Let's let the people fund the police and they can do it in their own community. It's kind of an ideal situation. You can watch your money go to work right in your hometown.
Do you think part of the reason beyond just the funding, because of course there's funding, but there's also prioritization, right? So certainly, given the numbers you just said, it sounds like in that county, drugs, dealing with that, fighting that is a bigger priority than fighting, child trafficking or sex abuse. Um, I wonder if there's a factor of just it's interesting what you were saying regarding like the people who are investigating stuff that you really have to be like in that world and following it to know to understand it and know what's going on. And I wonder if just the grotesque nature of the crime itself is something that sort of holds people back from looking into it in the same way because I mean I certainly don't want to spend time amongst these forums in detail. Like I don't I'm listening to you talk. I'm like I don't want to be I'm like count me out. I don't want to be in there. So kind of in the same way that I think part of the reason the issue is under discussed is because it's like there are many issues and problems and even crimes that you can discuss at the dinner table, right? You can sit down with people in pleasant company and you can kind of just talk about this issue or that issue or this one. And this is one area where it's just like, okay, like, you know, you can't, it's so taboo, like it's so gross that like, even if you were to talk about people that, okay, can we change the subject? Like, you know, like if I were not a podcaster, I don't think I would be anywhere near as aware of this issue as I am. I've had several people on over the years to talk about this particular issue. So I have an awareness of the scale of it and some of the statistics in the USA and around the world and so on. But I think most people, they know that it exists. They know that this is a category of crime, but they wouldn't have any idea how widespread it is. And I think it's part of the reason why so many parents are so blasé about giving their kids smartphones and still full social media access as well, because they have no idea. They're naive, right? They don't know that there are bad predatory people who use these platforms and they do all sorts of awful stuff. And you could actually make your child could become a target by playing a certain video game or by being connected to this thing. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, we were playing video games like no one, right? It wasn't even a concern. Like, it's not online. You're just playing with your friends in the room. Like, who would think that there's some creepy dude who's playing Roblox or freaking Minecraft or something, and who's trying to like groom kids in some massively online video game? Like, most people, I just don't think are aware of that.
Yeah. Well, you're right, man. You touched on so many points right there. It's first, I want to say I'm glad that this makes you uncomfortable. And and honestly, if it didn't make you uncomfortable, I'd be a little bit concerned because it doesn't make sense to a normal person's brain. Adult, child, sex. What? Your brain doesn't compute, right? It just doesn't. And so for us, it's not only that it's disgusting and gross, is our brain can't figure it out and make that connection. Thank God, right? That's a good thing. So don't think that, oh, I can't talk about it because this is weird and I don't understand it. That's a good thing. Number one. Number two, you mentioned law enforcement and having to be in these forums so deeply. It is hard, but I want to share something with everybody that's watching and listening. Any first responder of any capacity knows this. In their profession, any crime scene or whatever it may be, even if it's a paramedic, comes on a traffic accident or whatever, it's the scenes that take place with children that are the hardest. It could be a choking victim. It could be any. It doesn't even matter what it is. If it involves a child, they're by far the worst on scene crimes that any first responder deals with. So keep that in mind that when law enforcement sees these type of crimes, they almost can't go back to doing drugs because it is difficult, but the level of importance inside of them, and I'm saying this from me and from all my team and from so many people that I know, it's so difficult to work and like embezzling cases or fraud cases when you know that these children are innocent and they didn't choose to, and they're children. They're hard cases. So as hard as it is, and the hardest part about all this, hands down, is keeping your cool, right? Like the hardest thing is the natural occurring thing inside of us is to be angry. And now you're dealing with, yeah, seeing the darkness and seeing that is one thing. For me personally, what's really difficult is how do I handle the level of, I want to say, hate that I carry around for these individuals. And it really is a deep, dark rooted hate, but it's a justifiable anger, right? And so we all have to find ways. And that's another thing we're going to get into in the next year or two, in part of our training, is how do we build that mental wellness inside of departments too? Because these men and women who are working these crimes, it's the most difficult crimes there is. Not only does it involve children every time, now it involves a victimization of a child that now will create years of healing and trauma to a child that's undeserved. And so it's heavy and hard on the individuals working this. But just so you know, the law enforcement, they prefer these cases because they feel like it's a calling or a passion, or that it's worthy, it's of their time and energy, because they're, protecting children is a normal thing to most people. And so it's for them as well. They want to go out there and protect these children. So it's hard, just like the conversation's hard, but I think it's harder to live with being victimized for the rest of your life, potentially. How, not the rest of your life, but it'll play a part in your life. And that's so much more difficult. So as a parent, having those conversations might be difficult, but it's more difficult dealing with the ramifications of one of these crimes happening to a child. So it's worth it. Difficult things are sometimes very important. And so I would say this conversation is a very important, difficult conversation to have, a critical conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree on all those points. Tell me a little bit more about the work that the Innocent does with police departments.
Yeah. So in law enforcement in general, we're trying to change how they view these crimes, how they approach these crimes, and how they handle these crimes, how they investigate these crimes. For many years, people thought it was a volunteer, prostitution, pimp, prostitute. But now it really has to change, and it is changing. We have a long ways to go, but it is turned. It's made a turn. Instead of it being pimps and prostitutes volunteering or whatever it may be, the trafficker and the trafficked is really what we have to start looking at. My own investigator, when he first got into this 13 or 14 years ago, he was arresting children on the streets as criminals. And after he arrested them a couple times, and then he started to just watch them, and then he started to just have a conversation with them without arresting them and asking them, how'd you get here? Why? And what he quickly realized is that 14-year-old girl wasn't there because she wanted to be there. And when you start looking back in her life, there's reasons why she's there. And so now we have to look at her as a victim. And I think that's the biggest part about how we approach this. And not only that, but changing words. Law enforcement is changing words from interrogation to interview. So in the past, when one of these children would be taken in, they would go into an interrogation, full on interrogation. That's an uncomfortable thing, especially when these girls, we're going to have a podcast released soon with one of these survivors, a close friend who, amazing girl. But when she was very young in this, they brought in, she still doesn't know today if it was a real cop or a fake cop, but they would bring in somebody that they would believe to be a police officer, and they would question them. And the girls that told the truth, severe punishment for those girls. So they were taught and trained to lie and not to share anything with law enforcement, that law enforcement were the bad guys, right? And so when they get picked up by law enforcement, they're already preconceived that they're in a position to not share the truth, to not trust law enforcement, and that they're the bad guys. So how do you build trust in a relationship immediately with these children as a law enforcement officer so that they can share some of these truths, because it's so important for us to understand it, because there are information to this network that's out there, a spider web. So instead of interrogating them, investigate them. So let me get into what we're trying to do. These are all part of the shift that's happening inside of law enforcement. Even waking up, the older generations that are at the leadership levels of law enforcement who make decisions on a lot of different things on who's doing what and what investigations, they don't have the full understanding of social media, some of these platforms, access, and these type of things, unless we introduce it to them. And I've had a lot of pushback on certain individuals who believe that it may not be happening. So then I ask if we can do an undercover um, investigation and then expose some evidence, and then it quickly, hopefully, um, has them realize, okay, this is something we need to prioritize, because they believe that it's not really as much of a crime that it is. And so sharing with them evidence is critical. And that's part of what we want to do too, is sharing with them not only how it's happening, but where it's happening, because their investigators don't even know where to start. And that's where we come in. We come in and we have different tier levels. So we would come in, one, let's get you some equipment that's going to make you, not have to wait 6 months for the budget to approve, or maybe it doesn't get approved. And then now you have to have this sterile computers, tablets, certain things. And you have to have high performing, almost gaming type computers to be able to analyze a lot of evidence and certain things. And so how do we just cut that red tape and, like, within a day or two, get you that technology and software? There's really expensive software that makes it very effective and efficient at doing these online investigations, because most of your evidence isn't going to be physical evidence. It's going to, like, wearing the 007 camera and going in, all your evidence is digital evidence. So there's software out there that's pretty expensive to departments, that we provide, that gets them up and running. Five of their officers can be, or many of their officers can be up and running, and they're housing these cases so quickly, so efficient, so organized. And so we can get them that type of thing. And then we can come in. Hopefully they have somebody that's already trained. We try to follow the ICAC standards. That's Internet Crimes Against Children, through the Department of Justice. If they don't have somebody that's trained in chatting online, we'd recommend that happening before we come. Maybe they have somebody that does, but it's not super critical. It's just recommended. We come in, and then we run a full scale, beginning to end. Where does it start? Starts with the counts, knowing what it is, go through laws, the entire investigations. We touch a little bit on chatting, but it's not really a chatting course. And then now we go into setting up a full scale operation. So if we take 5 to 6 departments, 2 or 3 individuals from each one, everybody's assigned a role. We're building basically a mini task force, so that when we leave here at the end of the week, we run them through a full rep, and we actually have somebody show up, and then they make the arrest, and everybody follows those procedures. So they get a real rep in on how to do these investigations. Then we leave. We go to another department, but they can continue to do these operations together. And it doesn't really drown out the one department. It's much easier. It's a scaled operation. So even if you can only get 6 men or women from all those departments, or 10 or 15, it doesn't matter. We build it to however it is, it's scalable to where you're at, so that you can continue to be proactive. And why is it important to be proactive? Well, according to the National Sex Offenders Registry, 117 victims each typical pedophile will abuse in their lifetime. So we need to get there as soon as possible, right? Because if the sooner we can get to these individuals instead of waiting to react to them, the sooner we can, our wins, we don't ever know. We can tell you how many departments we've trained, how many officers, but what we never will know is how many lives avoided being traumatized and victimized because of the training that we provided, made those arrests, and put them behind bars, hopefully for 25 years. So that created 25 years of innocence from maybe multiple victims at that point. And I'm talking victims inside their own home, or nieces, nephews, cousins, they're across the board. And these people show up anywhere. We can talk about the profile, too, because people always think that it's like, what do I look for in this individual? And it's very difficult, because they're amongst all of us in community.
I do want to ask, Nate. I mean, I don't know if you can answer this, because fully understanding human behavior is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do on any level. But like, are there certain things that like drive the people who do this? Like, I mean, is this something that is, I don't know, innate to some degree, or is this something that something happens in their life and it leads them to this? What is it? Because obviously, this is not like normal people do not do this or even think it. In fact, most, vast majority of people have a natural and rightful like aversion, complete aversion to this. Um, so, what is the screw loose in these individuals? I mean, clearly they exist in every society, in every country, in some degree, and it's not a brand new thing. The internet thing might be a relatively new, modern adaptation of it, but as far as I can see from history, this is something that's like always existed and has always needed to. People have had to be vigilant about, or should be. So I don't know. Sometimes I see and I hear these things, and I'm just like, gosh, like what's wrong with these people? Like, how does this happen?
I think before I get into that, we have to set the stage for reality. And people people may be confused about drugs because they've never smelled a drug, seen a drug. There's a new drug that's been developed, and they don't really have a real relationship with drugs. So they're like, it's far off. I don't even know where to buy those drugs, that type of thing. But when you start talking about humanity, which is a very difficult thing to try to conquer, understanding humans and behavior, but what we can admit across the globe is humans have some sort of relationship with sex. Now, we can define it and describe it in dozens of different ways, right? But every human has some relationship with sex. Maybe it's a personal one, maybe it's whatever they're choosing to do or however they view it or what. So let's just start there. No human is has immunity from the desire to have sex or whatever that dopamine or whatever it is. Some of them is more of a lust feeling, some of it is really a connection feeling. But I also want to touch on what you had mentioned. And this is why the work that we do, bringing light into the darkness or stopping the darkness from spreading like a plague, is so important. When victims are victimized, they are more likely going to victimize others. Now, it's not always a really criminal thing. Sometimes it's actually, I hate to say this, an innocent thing because they're told at a young age, this is normal. This is what you do. It feels good. And then they just can think it's normal. And they might go to their friend innocently saying, like, hey, have you ever done this or try this? And then that kid who was in that kid's shoes before, not having even a conversation about the birds and bees with their parents, now that kid's where that kid was going like, whoa, this is weird. I've never, no, 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 it's normal. It's okay. And then it can just continue to spread. That's just one way of it spreading innocently, right? Maybe a older sibling of a child's friend is exploring on the child who doesn't know that it's wrong. So there's a lot of ways. Now, I'll continue a little bit more. I think that for me, the porn industry has really opened a new access. And the reason that I say that, when you start looking at algorithms on social media or any place really, a human may have at one point at a young age looked at a Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue of a girl in a bikini and gone like, "Whoa, what's that feeling? That's crazy." Right? It's a grown woman in her 30s, whatever, maybe late 20s. And then the mind started thinking like, well, they're being thrown stuff. Maybe it's girls gone wild or whatever it is, like these certain things. But they're college age kids. They start looking at porn online because, let's be honest, there's no regulations, there's no restrictions. Anyone can access it at any time, right? That's just the simple truth. It's not like when I was a kid. It's hidden in the back corner. They're hiding it, and you got to verify you're 18 to get access to it. And it wasn't as prominent as it is and prevalent. And it wasn't such a moneymaker as it is now. Now it's charging and really driving an economy. So Now, when you start watching these videos, you're maybe potentially just watching normal porn, you know, and they're introducing you to a younger version. And so now, whoa, that hits a different dopamine level inside of you. Whoa, interest, intrigue, those certain things. And then it continues because that might wear off, just like a drug. You know, you might start with the marijuana, and then all of a sudden, you're next thing you know, you're doing heroin. You're like, how the hell did I get here? Um, and I think that it keeps pushing people. Now, there's people who are like, hey, look, I don't even want to look at these young 18, 19, 20 year olds. Like, they draw a line, right? Like, doesn't even like attract them, right? But there's people whose behavior becomes a real strong drug addiction and they continue to go lower. So I think that having that access, if it wasn't out there, and then people start consuming it, now they're driving the demand. So now there's more people wanting to create these child rape videos, is really what they are, child sexual abuse material or assault material is what I like to call it. And so now it's driving a certain behavior. And do we know where all these start? We don't we can speculate on a lot of different areas. We can interview these individuals. Where did it come from? How did it start? Is it a sickness? Is it hereditary? What is it? And you know, I don't think there's a blanket statement of like X and Y equals Z, right? And so it just exists, and then we just have to, as a I think as humans, we have to find ways to just protect our children. How do we navigate this world? And what are we doing? And restrictions and certain things that just are unacceptable. You know, that we have to just draw the line and prioritize it. We prioritized drugs at one point, right? This war on drugs. Uh, but it's time, I think, we need to prioritize children and the innocence of children. You know, this is how I feel. I have young kids, and when I look at their sense of wonder, like deep down in a child's eyes, we all lose that. Unfortunately, as adults, you know, you get bitter, you carry baggage, and you know, you just have that innocence just taken away at some way or just disappears. I don't know, but man, isn't that one of the most beautiful commodities in life? Is that child's sense of wonder and the innocence of just trusting, and man, don't we want to preserve that? You know, preserving natural forests and all that is amazing. But what about humans? When you talk about human behavior, let's look to our children who are our future. But how do we preserve that innocence and that sense of wonder in a child? And why are we not like screaming that this should be a priority? You know, and I don't understand anybody that could argue with that. I really don't.
Yeah, you know, like the conversation about priorities is a really interesting one on an individual level and on a societal one because it's it's been proven to me that the powers that be, governments, you know, public services, whatever it is, even people in general, like the media for sure, if they really want to, if they really care about something, they can really, really get the message out. Do you know the thing that made me so like fully convinced about their capability to do this was the 2020 to 2022 whole COVID pandemic situation. That made it so clear to me that when they want to create awareness about a situation and they want people to care, they can they can flick that switch, not just in one country, in different countries. They can flick that switch and they can make people aware. They can make people care. They can really do it if they want to. So I don't know, with this issue, I just wonder like how much of it is lack of awareness, how much of it is lack of will, how much of it is sketchy people in high places, you know, maybe being involved in something or something coming back towards them because we also know that that exists to some degree. How deep is that rabbit hole? I don't know, but we know that, you know, even the average person knows that it exists to some degree. Um, so gosh, yeah, I don't know. It can be frustrating. It's saddening because in my personal worldview, I mean, there's nothing that should be protected more by a society than children and their innocence. Like that's the I think a society doesn't have a future if it gives up on protecting children both physically and emotionally and spiritually. Like, children must be protected. And anytime it makes it clear to me that that is not happening at scale, any issue where that rubric applies, it just, yeah, it's upsetting. It frustrates me. It angers me. And yeah, like you're right. I mean, the anger that it can provoke is that's a whole nother thing in itself. Like, I don't consider myself like a particularly emotional, particularly on when it comes to negative emotions. Like, I'm super low in neuroticism. I don't get like easily angered or frustrated, but just talking about these types of issues and knowing what some people do and whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, like it makes me like violent. It like brings out like my violent side, which is normally very, very well suppressed. And I'm just like thinking of all sorts of punishments that I think should be issued for this. Um, oh boy. But yeah, I mean, and I guess it's important to have the conversation of, for the people who are listening, especially people who are parents, but even those who are not, just, you know, normal, decent people who are listening to this. Of course, there's always that question of, okay, well, what can I do? Um, so, what is a good answer to that? What can people who want to do something and want to support or protect in some way, shape, or form within their means? What are some things that you recommend that they can do?
Well, I'll just go straight into the a minute ago you said there's this anger, right? There's this just violent side of you. And I say the first thing is we're all going to feel that. People listening right now, they're going to feel that. Let's channel it. And that's really a lot of the reason why the innocent was created. People inside the United States, including myself, felt hopeless, helpless. What can we do? Well, here's an opportunity. If you go to theinnocent.org, that's our website, click on community. And that's an easy way to first just start. You and I can start having a conversation. We can build these awareness events, education, which I always say start getting educated, because here's really what it comes down to. One, we're going to hopefully have an education piece that we're partnering with an organization in the next month or so, and I would advise you all to go and take that. It does cost money, but it's very inexpensive, and you have access for a year to this education, and it's a significant education, but it's very well done. That way you can really understand and talk about these things. Then I honestly think you spearhead an initiative in your community. Be the leader. Somebody has to. Somebody has to lead this change and this charge inside of your community. It might start small. It might be 6 or 8 people. And eventually you're like, well, we're going to put on an event. And then you walk for innocence. We've done that where people walk a 5K. Walking, most people can do is walk. Doing a run, some people can't run. Do one of these things and bring people together for a cause that you would be surprised how many people want to do something about it. They just don't know how. So you can help provide an opportunity for people to come together, and then you can educate them as well. And then that can turn into a lot of things. One, go to your city council meetings. When 100 people show up to a city council meeting and demand change in prioritizing children, they actually probably will listen, especially when they're being voted in by the people. Those are some of the things you can do. Here's the other great thing. If you want to see actual impact and actual change, when you start raising a small amount of money, I believe, to bring us in to provide some of this equipment and training for a week for maybe 5 or 6 departments in your area to build this task force. The amount of money that can be raised, I mean, I've seen individuals pay for the whole thing for that community, but it's not hard for a community to raise, $10,000 to $15,000. As a community, you should be able to raise that. And then you can come in, we can come in. We'll first of all, we have to make the connection with your law enforcement. My whole team is active duty law enforcement at this time. They will reach out and talk to the law enforcement department in your area. But we have not found a department yet that says no to, oh, you're coming to us to do it in our facility for free, and you're bringing equipment that you're going to leave behind. This sounds too good to be true. Well, it's too good and it's true. And so we'll take care of that. but we would just need your community to come together. Now, look, can we pay for it? Certainly, but it doesn't have the same effect when it does. But I want the community to feel part of it as well. When they see the wins taking place in their own community and know they had something to do with it, then you don't feel helpless or hopeless, because then you actually feel like your efforts, whether it's time, your treasure, or your talents, made an impact locally and is cleaning up and making safer communities for your children and your grandchildren. That's what I got to say. If you on our website too, I have to say this because we are only can do so much, right? So the people are the fuel to our mission to protect and preserve the innocence of children inside the United States. On our website, there's a little blue button. It says donate. We call it a protector. If you did as little as $10 a month, and we say that as little as $10 a month, it's not a lot to sacrifice. If you can do more, thank you. I imagine there's enough people listening right now. If everybody did $10 a month, we could do 1 or 2 states a month we could be in. But if people think, well, my $10 is going to make a big difference and everybody has that attitude, then it won't. But when more people come together, it's a stronger army. We need more people putting in, I think, a little bit of, I call it fuel, through us, not to us, through us to these agencies to go make impact. And so those are some of the ways. Stay tuned. Sign up for our newsletter on our website or email, because we're gonna be sharing certain things on what's the new trends, what's some new technology, what do you got to look out for. We have a YouTube channel we're gonna start putting out little pieces on called it's at the innocent.children. Follow us on social media. I'll be doing lots of videos, a lot where we're just sharing with parents on how to keep you educated, keep you informed, keep you updated, and then we'll announce that education when it's available, hopefully in April. And so those are just certain ways for you to just stay engaged. And then what's easy? An easy way is to just talk about it. Have these conversations. They're difficult, right? They're difficult dinner conversations, but just start having them. Really start having them. And for those of you out there, spiritually or whatever, just keep thinking and praying for the individuals that are involved with this, because man, they are camped out on the gates of hell, and it's hard. And there's some sort of warfare taking place that we are very involved with, and they want to stop us from doing what we do. And I'll tell you straight up, social media is one of those. And I can do a video with stats from the Department of Justice, and I will get shut down, and then I can't even pay them as an ad to go out because it goes against community standards. What in the world is protecting children? How does that go against community standards? That's the exact opposite of going against community standards. So be a voice, and that's really what we need. We need a voice of people out there. There's things, like I said, contact us, follow us, whatever you need to do, and we'll try to do our part, keep you guys educated, and give you avenues to make impact.
Awesome. Well, Nate, massive respect for all the work you're doing. It's extremely important. And it's been an honor to have you on Real Talk with Zuby. Just one quick time. What is the website? Just give people the website one more time.
Theinnocent.org, or you can follow us. Most of our channels are at theinnocent.usa. And I want to say thanks to you, Zuby, because you are a huge propellant to this cause. Because it's people like you who take the time and take their platform, or whatever people want to call it, your reach, to really connect with the people and share truth. And for you to do that, that's a huge part. That's like writing the book that changed and ended slavery in the 1800s. Like talking to the people, man, and getting out there and having access to the people and using that for good. Thank you. That's amazing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nate. Just doing my best, man. Nate Lewis, thanks for coming on Real Talk with Zuby. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine.